Well, I think Jay Carney's credibility is shot, but he's the spokesman for the President of the United States. So the question is the Obama administration's credibility shot? And the bigger question really is, I mean, Benghazi is not just an aberration, in my view, or even really a scandal. Benghazi is Obama's foreign policy. Intervene, but then don't do anything. Lead from behind. So passivity and inaction in Libya, which allowed the situation to build up that led to the attack on 9/11. Then the president's absent the whole night of the crisis. Then they evade responsibility and deceive the American people. And that pattern is not limited to that one instance in Benghazi.
Congressman Kucinich, I think it's fair to say you're a liberal Democrat, but I want to ask you, does it bother you that the CIA, as we now know, originally wrote about links to al-Qaeda, originally wrote about having warned the State Department for months about threats in Benghazi, and that all of that was taken out? And let's put this up on the screen. State Department official Victoria Nuland wrote, in pushing back against what the CIA had written, that information could be abused by members of Congress to beat up the State Department for not paying attention to warnings. So why would we want to feed that either? Concerned. This, Congressman, from the transparent administration of Barack Obama.
Well, I didn't need those memos to know that it was wrong for us to intervene in Libya. So this is one liberal Democrat who said the intervention was wrong. And what the attack on the consulate brings up, Chris, is the failure of the Benghazi policy from the beginning. And that's why they had to call it a street demonstration instead of an attack, because then on the eve of an election, that brought in a whole new narrative about foreign policy, about dealing with terrorism, and about the consequences that led to 4 deaths of people who served the United States.
So do you think those talking points were politically scrubbed?
Well, of course they were. Come on, are you kidding? You know, this is one of those things that you have to realize. We're in the circumference of an election. And when you get on the eve of an election, everything becomes political. Unfortunately, Americans died. And people who believe in America, who put their lives on the line, they weren't provided with protection, they weren't provided with a response. They and their families had a right to make sure that they were defended. Look, we went into Benghazi under the assumption that somehow there was going to be a massacre in Benghazi. So we went there to protect the Libyan people. We couldn't go into Benghazi to protect our own Americans who were serving there. I'm offended by this, and there has to be real answers to the questions that are being raised.
Kim, let's assume that Congressman Kucinich is right and that the talking points were politically scrubbed to protect Hillary Clinton, to protect Barack Obama running for re-election. Is that where this scandal ends? What evidence is there? There certainly were misjudgments, but what evidence is there that the administration did anything wrong, either before or during the attack?
Well, the thing is, we don't know. And this is what we found out this week, that the official record that is out there on all kinds of things is simply not correct, okay? So, you know, apparently the White House was not involved in the talking points. That's not true. Apparently Hillary Clinton was just a footnote in all of this. That was not true. Apparently, supposedly, the requests for aid were never denied. We've heard this week that that was not true. And so the White House faces an issue here, which is, where do we go? Where do we get these answers? And that's why you're now hearing calls for a bipartisan select committee. The Democrats keep claiming that this is partisan. This is a partisan exercise. The only way you're going to get these answers is if you actually put a committee, put both sides on it, give them the power of deposition, give them the power of subpoena, finally get the emails, finally talk to all the witnesses in public. And if the White House really claims that it has nothing to hide, then it shouldn't fear such an exercise. But that's the only way that you're going to start getting any answers to this. Otherwise, it's going to drip, drip, drip on like this week after week.
Juan.
Well, I mean, let me just say that for all the media attention that it has deservedly got this week after the gripping testimony that we saw from Gregory Hicks in Congress, there's nothing new. There's nothing new in terms of the details that we've seen in the emails about what happened before.
Wait. Did you know prior to this week that there had been a dozen versions of the emails?
I don't know how many versions, but it didn't surprise me.
But that's new then.
No, it doesn't surprise me. Are you kidding? Bureaucratic infighting in Washington is new to you?
Did you know that Victoria Nuland had said, I want the fact that the CIA had written about this, that they've been warning for months? Did you know about that? Because I didn't.
Warning what?
Had been warning the State Department for months about threats to the Benghazi.
Oh, no, that came out in the ARB report, which said, this is Admiral Mullen and Ambassador Pickering. They said that the security lapses had occurred, and that's why people at State got fired. that State
But they
Department
didn't say that the CIA had put it in the talking points and the State Department had wanted it out.
Clearly what they said was there was a lack of proper security there, and that State had not responded adequately, and of course State had been blaming
Again,
Congress.
we didn't know that Victoria Nuland had said that my building's leadership is going to get heartburn.
Let me just say, the key point here is not Victoria Nuland, who, by the way, has worked for Republicans and Democrats and Vice President Cheney. The key point here is, did we learn anything about what happened before Benghazi or during Benghazi that would implicate the President or the Secretary of State? Answer, no.
Well, we learned that what we learned is that the story that's out there, though, is not true.
What do you mean?
Again, everything that they have said up until now, that they weren't involved in the talking points, that politics was not involved, that
the White House only made one stylistic change.
This is all about bureaucratic infighting.
No, you know what? Who's supposed to resolve bureaucratic infighting in the United States government? The President of the United States. I half agree with Juan that nothing wildly, some of us have been very concerned about this for 8 months. I mean, that's why we were concerned, because this was a horrible failure. It was a failure by the State Department, which last I looked was headed by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton up till then, not by a bunch of assistant secretaries and deputy assistant secretaries. And it was a terrible failure by the Obama administration. And this week has shed more light on their failures.
Well, that's
wait. Excuse me. I just want to get to one last subject. When we're running out of time, and Congressman Kucinich, I want to ask you, as I discussed with the two congressmen at the beginning of the show, a couple of conservative groups this week came up with, I think you have to call them attack ads against Hillary Clinton and Benghazi, linking her to that. We're talking about Victoria Nuland not being important. How damaging do you think this week's revelations and the whole affair are to Hillary Clinton?
That's going to remain to be seen. I mean, the fact of the matter is that we first have to know that this had an impact on the 2012 election because the truth didn't come out before the election. And now in 2016, I don't know. I mean, you can't predict it. But one thing for sure, the Secretary Clinton has to be accountable here. And she has more questions to answer. That's just a fact. How she answers them, we'll see.
And Kim,